Hi guys, thank you so much for clicking onto this video. I really do appreciate it. And this is how I made Duke Caboom out of yarn. In the spirit of Toy Story 4, I thought I would make my own toy, just like Bonnie does in the movie. Except instead of a spork and some glue, I'm gonna use yarn, right? And some supplies before you get started. You'll need 4 colors of yarn: flesh-colored nude, brown, red, and white, 2 buttons for the eyes, double-sided needles, threading needle, the cable needle, stitch markers, crochet needle, sewing needle, thread, and stuffing. So this will require some advanced knitting skills. If you want to try this at home, I wouldn't recommend it to the beginner. But hey, if you want to be ambitious, as Duke Caboom would say, yes, I Canada. Just keep on practicing those knitting skills and you'll get there eventually. Yeah, I don't really want to talk during this entire video. I think most of it is pretty self-explanatory. You don't want to hear me talk, I don't want to hear me talk, so here's Keanu Reeves reading a book.
For 63 days I've been on my way, and I burned to reach the longed-for land. On June 8th, we saw strange fires moving about in zigzags. Fishermen. Against the dark sky, a jagged black cone stood out. We were rounding Moorea and coming in sight of Tahiti. A few hours later, the dawn twilight became visible, and slowly we approached the reefs of Tahiti, then entered the fairway and anchored without mishap in the roads. To a man who has traveled a good deal, this small island is not, like the Bay of Rio de Janeiro, a magic sight. A few peaks of sub-mountain after the deluge, a family climbed up there, took root. The corals also climbed. They ringed round the new island. At 10 in the morning, I called on Governor La Cascade, who received me as a man of consequence, entrusted by the government with a mission, ostensibly artistic, but mainly consisting in political spying. I did all I could to undeceive the political people. It was no good. They thought I was paid. I assured them I was not. Having only just arrived, rather disappointed as I was by things being so far from what I had longed for, and this was the point imagined, disgusted as I was by all this European triviality, I was sad, coming so far to... Shall I manage to recover any trace of that past, so remote and so mysterious? And the present had nothing worthwhile to say to me, to get back to the ancient hearth, revive the fire in the midst of all these ashes, and for that, quite alone, without any support. Cast down though I am not in the habit of giving up, without having tried everything, the impossible as well as the possible. My mind was soon made up to leave Papeete as quickly as I could, to get away from the European center. I had a sort of vague presentiment that by living wholly in the bush with the natives of Tahiti, I would manage with patience to overcome these people's mistrust, and that I would know. An officer of the gendarmerie graciously offered me his carriage and his horse. I left one morning in search of my hut. My vahine went with me. Titi was her name. Almost an English girl, but she spoke a little French. That day she had put on her best dress, a flower behind her ear, and her sugarcane hat, which she had plaited, was adorned above its ribbon of straw flowers with a trimming of orange-colored shells. Her black hair hung loose over her shoulders. Like this, she looked really pretty. She was proud of being in a carriage. She was proud of being well-dressed. She was proud of being the vahine of a man she believed to be important and highly paid. All this pride had nothing absurd about it, so adjusted is their cast of features for wearing dignity. Ancient memories of great chieftains, a race that has had such a feudal past. I well knew that all her mercenary love was composed merely of things that, in our European eyes, make a whore. But to one observer, there was more than this. Such eyes and such a mouth could not lie. There is in all of them A love so innate that, whether mercenary or not mercenary, it is still love. Besides, At noon, we reached the 45th kilometer, the Mateea district. I visited the district and in the end found rather a fine hut, which the owner consented to let me. He would build another one next door to live in. On our way back next day in the evening, Titi asked me if I would agree to take her with me. Later, in a few days, when I've moved in, I realized that this half-white girl, glossy from contact with all those Europeans, would not fulfill the aim I had set before me. I shall find them by the dozen, I said to myself. But the country is not the town. And besides, is it necessary to take them in the Maori fashion, Maus Aisis? And I did not know their languages. The few young girls in Mateea who do not live with a Tane, man, look at you with such frankness, utterly fearless dignity, that I was really intimidated. Also, it was said that many of them were sick, of that sickness which the civilized Europeans have brought them in return for their generous hospitality. After a little while, I let Titi know that I would be happy if she would return. And yet in Papeete, she had a terrible reputation. She had buried several lovers in succession. Description: landscape, shoreside, picture of the woodcutter, inland, the mango seen against the mountain, over the entrance to the impressive cave. I went that evening to smoke a cigarette on the sands by the seashore. The sun was rapidly approaching the horizon. It was beginning to hide behind the Isle of Morea, which I had on my right. Against its light, the mountain stood out in strong black upon the blazing sky. Night came quickly. This time again, Morea was asleep. I fell asleep later in my bed, silence of a Tahitian night. Only the beating of my heart could be heard. The reeds of my hut and their spaced rows were visible from my bed, with the moonlight filtering through them like an instrument of music. Pipo, our ancestors called it. Vivo is their name for it, but silent. It speaks at night through memories. I fell asleep to that music. Above me, the great high roof of screw pine leaves. The lizards dwell there. In my sleep, I could imagine space above my head, the vault of heaven, not a prison in which one stifles. My hut was space, freedom. After 2 days, I had exhausted my provisions. I had imagined that with money, I would find all that is necessary for nourishment. The food is there, certainly on the trees, on the mountain slopes, in the sea. But one has to be able to climb a high tree, to go up the mountain and come back laden with heavy burdens, to be able to catch the fish, dive and tear from the sea bottom the shells firmly attached to the rocks. So there I was, a civilized man, for the time being definitely inferior to the savage. And as, on an empty stomach, I was pondering sadly on my situation, a native made signs to me and shouted in his language, "Come and eat." I understood, but I was ashamed, and shaking my head, refused. A few minutes later, a child silently laid at the side of my door some food cleanly done up in freshly picked leaves, then withdrew. I was hungry, so silently I accepted. A little later, the man went by and with a kindly expression, without stopping, said to me a single word, "Baya." I understood vaguely, "Are you satisfied?" On the ground, under some clusters of broad pumpkin leaves, I caught sight of a small, dark head with quiet eyes. A little child was examining me, then made off timorously when its eyes met mine. These black people, these cannibal teeth, brought the word savages into my mouth. For them, too, I was the savage.
Duke Caboom, Canada's greatest stuntman. Huh. Oh yeah. Ha. Huh. Yes. Oh yeah.
Thank you for watching this video, and if you enjoyed it, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe. I am just so beautiful. I am so happy with how I turned out. Mwah, mwah. And as always, for the ladies. Okay, goodbye.
Huh. Oh yeah. Ha. 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 Yes. Hold on. One more. Oh yeah.